what was really important for us is to very clearly understand our why. Why are we telling her, and why are we telling her now? What was our motivation, and really getting clear about that.
Welcome to Making Polyamory Work. Hi, I'm Libby Sinback, and I want to thank you for joining me today. I'm a queer polyamorous mom and a relationship transformation coach, and I am committed to helping people who live and love outside the status quo have extraordinary relationships, because relationships are at the core of our well-being as humans. I think love is why we're here and how we heal. So today on Making Polyamory Work, we have Catherine from Expansive Connection. And today we're going to answer a listener question. And I'm very excited to have Catherine on the show. Catherine and I have known each other for a while, been in the mutual admiration society of each other. But Catherine is a licensed therapist and relationship coach and yoga teacher, and she brings 18 years of experience and teaches through mindfulness, education, metaphors, and example, and has been doing a lot of support for non-monogamous folks for quite a long time. And Catherine, is there anything else you just want to say about yourself to introduce yourself to my listeners?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. It is an honor because I have you in my ear very often as I walk my dogs and exercise. And so very often my exercise routines are interrupted by me stopping and forwarding your podcast to my clients. So it is so exciting to be here with you. So thank you so much for having me. So I have been in the helping field, as we call it, as a therapist for 18 years. And 8 years ago, my husband and I opened up our marriage, and boy, what a wild ride it has been in all the ways. And about a year into it, I was approached about, well, actually the very first time we went to Desire in Mexico, I had a guy follow me around the whole time saying, "Will you please counsel me and my girlfriend? I'll pay you anything you want per hour. We just need help." And I was like,
wow, you're on vacation.
My first vacation of this, like very first foray into this. I was like, dude, I have no idea what I'm doing. You could probably counsel me better than I could counsel you. But within about a year, I did start getting more and more serious requests for that. And I was asked to be on a podcast to discuss the journey that I personally had with jealousy. And it really made me realize that people not only want lifestyle or ethical non-monogamy friendly therapists or coaches, they really love that we are walking this journey ourselves and are willing to be do self-disclosure and open ourselves up and tell our own stories. And just like you and I, when we were having our coffee date before we started recording, where we have our head in our hands going, "Oh my gosh, this is so hard sometimes." I think my clients seem to really appreciate that I'm willing to be on the journey and also share it. So I started a business coaching. I did go ahead and stop working under my license as a therapist so that I could put my work toward coaching people all over the world, and have since grown my business to include 2 other coaches that bring expertise of their own with Enneagram and the adult chair work of understanding inner parts. Also, one of my coaches is certified in DBT, which is a wonderful way to help people manage extreme emotional reactions, which certainly ethical non-monogamy can bring up. And she's also trauma informed and also a sex therapist. So the 3 of us work together to do individual and couples and more some coaching, but also we are all educators. So we have a lot of ways that we like to, similar to you, teach people skills so that in the moment when they are flipping out, they have something they can pull out of the tool belt to try to change the course of these emotional reactions that are so old and baked into us from our childhood. So it's been a really fun ride. And I'm excited to talk to you today about what we're talking about. But I do want to say, I am absolutely not an expert, as we just discussed, who is an expert on parenting, but I do happen to be a parent and and I have been in ethical non-monogamy. So the combination of those 2 is really exciting for me to talk about today.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you talk about this because you're also a parent of an older child, whereas I have young kids, and our journeys integrating our kids into our non-monogamy lives are very different. But sidebar, I think maybe there's another conversation in the future for us talking about help, what it means to give help and get help, because that's something that's been on my mind a lot. But I'm going to put a pin in it, because what we're going to talk about is this listener question, which I got a while ago. And I want to be accountable to my listeners who send me questions. I know that I am slow at getting answers to your questions, sometimes painfully, agonizingly slow, but it's because I want to bring in other awesome people to talk about it. So this listener wrote to me and they said, "Hello, thank you for your work on these podcasts. I've listened to your podcast regarding children, but I'm wondering what you do if you need to tell kids who are either in middle school or high school, who are older, and how to approach that with them, as well as having partners stay in the home occasionally with kids that age." And so thank you in advance for that. Mm-hmm. And, and I was, for those of you who don't know, I am a mom of young kids. They are now 7 and 9 though. So they keep getting bigger.
Crazy how they do that.
So yeah, they do. If you keep feeding them, they just keep growing. And, our journey into non-monogamy started before they were born. And so our children have never not known their parents to be non-monogamous. There have always been other adults staying over in the house. And of course, not just romantic partners, but also friends and things like that. So when my kid was 2, he would come into the room and maybe see me in bed with a partner and cuddle with us. And that was no big deal. It was just normal. But I have always I haven't had the experience of having to come out to my kids as though they thought it was one way and now it's another way. And so that's why I thought, because Catherine, you have had that experience.
Right.
And so I thought that would be really useful for my listeners to hear, not just there's the 2 pieces, right? There's the, what should you do? and how should you be thinking about this? And then also, I think I'm hopeful that you'll tell us what you did do.
Absolutely. I'm happy to share that.
Yeah. So why don't we start with, because I did a podcast episode about this where one of the things I said was, be thoughtful about what you're sharing with your children and really give them the right to not know things and think about what's developmentally appropriate. And I know you have some stuff to say about that as well when it comes to older kids. And I wonder when you share your thoughts.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I do want to say again a little bit in expectations and outcomes, which is also how I'd like to end our talk about this is expectations and outcomes, because I think those are so important, is that I just want to make sure that people don't hear my story as advice. This is the way to do it. These are just, I'm going to tell you how I did it, and I'm going to give you some reasons why. And I really just hope that your listeners will listen for resonance, but also listen for what doesn't feel right for their situation or their children or their partners. And please to not just take this as a template, but as a starting point and a launching point for making it your own unique space and journey.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that, because what I hear in that is, don't trust us, actually. Don't. And this is what I tell my clients too. I tell my clients, don't trust me, trust you. Right. And that's what I hear you saying in that statement is hear what we say, see what resonates for you, and really trust that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very important. Which I think is, I do like the same with my clients, with anything I offer or any podcast or resource, just bring it in as information, but make sure you check in and for the resonance.
Well, and can I say something about this that's just coming to me now? As a parent, how much advice do we get about how to raise our children? How many books, podcasts, Instagrams.
Oh, wait. And that's
well-meaning relatives.
I was about to say, that's when you actually have solicited it. How much unsolicited parenting advice do we get from grandparents?
Yeah, or strangers at freaking Target, right? Well, and there's a lot of pressure as a parent to do it right. And when things are going in a difficult direction, it's very visible in a lot of different ways. And there's a lot of opportunities to be ashamed or to feel shame around how you're doing as a parent. And, it can be really, really hard in those moments when you're not sure what you're doing to feel grounded in that self-resonance, right? In that self-trust, because there's all this advice out there. There's your kid maybe going through what's normal for a kid to go through, but it's not fun. It's not pleasant. It's really challenging. It's triggering all your shit. And to not like want to go and grab someone else's advice and just be like, this is what I should do, because it gives you some sense of like anchoring and certainty in what is fundamentally an uncertain and really challenging experience. Can be really hard. I mean, it can be really hard not to just want to do what someone tells you to do. And I remember that as a mom of like of babies, and my baby would be like crying, nonverbal, don't know what's going on. Turns out probably was just indigestion. But I'm like flipping through books being like, what do I do? And people would always tell me, well, just trust your instincts. And I was like, I don't know what the fuck my instincts are telling me right now. I need a book, but now with the hindsight, I wish I had been able to tell myself, no, you can actually slow down with yourself and just listen to yourself. You don't know, but they don't either. And the way you're going to know is not by listening to them, but by figuring it out. I mean, you can listen to the experts or the not expert experts, right? You can listen to us, but it is really important that you also slow down with yourself and listen to your kid too, and trust your kid. And because that's where the answers are. And but I just want to name how hard that is.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. So yes. So let's go with what you just said of listening to the child. So for me, the first question that we asked and that I think is important for people to consider is what specifically do they need to know and why?
Yeah.
And as you've said, making it developmentally appropriate. I think it's really important for what was really important for us is to very clearly understand our why. Why are we telling her, and why are we telling her now? What was our motivation, and really getting clear about that. One of the things that we used was from a wonderful podcast about sex ed for children, and I got this advice from them, which was give them a little information and then listen for when they're saturated. So instead of explaining the whole female reproductive system and getting really detailed about fallopian tubes, say one little thing and then listen for what they ask, and then let them lead with those questions, and tell them that you're doing that. Say, I'm going to let your questions, especially with older children, I'm going to let your questions lead how much I tell you. And I'm going to make space for it. So, when you're ready to ask questions, I'll answer them. And it is wild if you do this with sex ed, or if you do this with your relationship structure or gender identity or sexual orientation, any of this, it is so interesting because you give them a little piece of information and they'll usually ask one or two, sometimes really thoughtful questions. Mm-hmm. And then the third question will be, so why do they sell chocolate milk but not caramel milk? And they will ask it with the same passion. And that the conversation is over and now it's time to talk about caramel milk.
Yeah. What comes up for me when you say that is I actually, this is totally unrelated, but I was out on a bike ride with my kids trying to teach them how to use a gear bike. And I don't think I would have gotten what I got if I hadn't asked them after we rode a little bit. And we paused and we took a little water break. And I said, hey, do you have any questions about how this works? I think if I hadn't asked, hey, do you have any questions? I wouldn't have gotten the questions that I got. And I think you're right. When you get a question from a kid, that is showing they're interested and they're actually going to listen to you. And how often is it that we have something we really want to tell them and they don't fucking want to know?
Right. Yep. Or we try to tell them too much because we've worked our way up to this big conversation and we're nervous and we want to get it over with as quickly as possible. And then we feed them from a fire hose and they're like, what?
Well, and they don't process it. And they're irritated with us for distracting them from what their agenda is. And you know what it is, Catherine? It's not relational.
Right.
We're doing to them instead of doing with them.
So true. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think I'll just jump into how we did it. Is that, you want me to just tell you this?
I want to hear the story.
Well, so our daughter was 11 and a half, and we had been open at this point for probably 5.5 years, but most of our openness had been a little more on the swinging side of things, couples dating a lot. We live in a small town. And so a lot of our interaction with ethical non-monogamy was out of town. So it was just, her understanding was just that mama and daddy go out of town a lot. We like to go see friends in cities. We live in the mountains, so we like to go have our city time. We always have normalized to her how important our marriage is for the stability of our whole family unit, and that when we are going on a date, it's not because we want to get away from her necessarily, but that we also see it as investment in our family unit. So yes, we love spending time together, but we also have always kind of helped her have buy-in to understand that it also benefits her.
Well, and I think, I love that you say that. And I think normalizing that we have other people that we care about besides just each other. Like, even if you're not ready to come out to your kid, even if you're not ready to be polyamorous yourselves, even like normalizing that it's normal for adults to have other people in their lives and other relationships and a network of social support. I think that's actually modeling like really healthy relating in a way that, a lot of us are, there's been a lot of discourse about how the nuclear family is very isolating and very insular and it's very difficult to raise children that way. And so if parents can normalize for their kids, hey, it's okay to have outside resources. It's okay to have other people you talk to besides your partner. Like, you're already, I think, strengthening their future relational landscape too.
Yeah, that's a great point. So by this point, she had no idea, but I had started dating someone, and it had gotten much more serious. And I had been dating him about 9 months, and it was just getting to a point where I was scared she was going to catch us. And I just hated that. I didn't want that stink on it, because we've always been really honest and open with her, and to find out we were lying about that and he was becoming part of our unit in ways. I mean, she saw him as a friend of ours, but more mine. And he'd been around we'd gone snowboarding together, and he'd been around and hung out with, my husband and I in front of her. She would see me with skiing with just him or something like that. So she just assumed it was a male friend, but it was getting entrenched enough that my biggest motivation was not wanting her to catch us. Right.
Well, so, because if she caught you, she'd think you were cheating too. Absolutely. Right. So she would think you were betraying her father. Yes. And that would be horrible. And that actually happened to me, not with my kid, but with my mother-in-law. She actually read some text messages.
I remember hearing that.
Yeah. From one of my partners. And she thought I was cheating on her son. And, I think it actually is one of the reasons why when we did come out to them, it was so hard for them to acclimate that, because she already had a story. Yes. And then she had to undo that story and then create a new story. And I think that was really hard. So I think that's really a good point. And that goes to your why, right? Like, why would we tell her so that she doesn't think we're cheating?
Absolutely. So we sat down and talked to our own individual counselors, and our couples counselor, to get thoughts and ideas, to look for our own blind spots. And one of the pieces of advice that we got from that was, be sure to clear your own static and any personal judgments or shame that you're carrying around about it. And that was huge and slowed down the process, because we did want to be very intentional about and worked with our counselors on, what are our blind spots? What do you see? Where do you see shame that is so entrenched in the way I grew up that I'm not seeing it, that I might pass on to her? So we slowed way down in the preparation phase of clearing our own static, which also was incredibly therapeutic for us, right?
Well, and I could see that, because if you told her about it out of a sense of urgency, but then you yourself actually weren't fully okay with what you were telling her, she's going to pick up on that. Right. And then again, when you're talking about one of the reasons you want to do it is to maintain trust, right? To maintain a trusting relationship, to be in an honest relationship. When you tell her, but she can see there's something else going on under the surface, then she's not going to trust totally what you're saying.
Right. And that can be scary for children for sure. So
Mhm.
once we did that, we also talked to our other partners about their thoughts about this, any wishes or ideas or boundaries that they had.
Oh, I
And
love that.
that was another mind-blowing therapy, like, kind of therapeutically cathartic exercise, because my boyfriend, he tends to be a much more cynical person walking through the world than my husband and I. We can be pretty polyamorous and Pollyanna-ish of trusting others and believing in the good. And while sometimes his critical nature and negativity drives me crazy, in this case,
Mhm.
it's so helpful. And I got to see how much my kid meant to him. And he said, I want to make sure that he said, I don't want to scare her, but I don't want you guys to just make it out like rainbows and Care Bears and everybody's going to embrace this. Like, she needs to understand how awful people can be and how bullied they might be.
Oh.
And he's like, and I know you two will do it in a way that isn't too scary, but he said, my worst case scenario is her getting bullied at school because of something because of my relationship with you. Like, knowing that she could be hurt by what we're doing breaks my heart. And so
Mm.
double, it was really nice to have that perspective, and we did bring that into the conversation. But also, what a lovely opportunity for me to see how much my kid was impacting him. That was so sweet.
Well, I'm wondering, Catherine, like, was that something, maybe I'm jumping ahead, but I'm curious, is that something that came up, like, with when you talked to her about it? Was she worried about, like, what her friends might think, or, maybe we'll put a pin in it. I'm just,
Yeah.
I'm
We
jumping
will.
ahead.
We will. And I will talk about that. But the other thing that came out from that is my boyfriend said, I don't want, he said, I mean, she really, really wants to talk to me about it. That's fine. But I don't really want to be her place of getting information about this. It's not really a
Oh,
place that I feel comfortable. So he was able to set that boundary with me.
yeah.
And I loved that he set that. And it hasn't been that way. I mean, over the, almost 2 years since we've told her, they have a very close relationship. And I don't know that she's ever discussed clearly or openly anything about relationship or sex or anything with him.
Yeah.
But I did really appreciate that he had that boundary, and I think he appreciated that we brought him and his wishes into it ahead of time.
Yeah.
At the time, my husband was dating someone, but it was much more casual, so she wasn't as involved in the telling. She's very involved in our lives now, but I do think that that's an important piece, especially if your partners are going to be involved with the kids, to go ahead and anytime we can do some prevention or thinking ahead to set boundaries, then those boundaries don't feel as harsh, I think.
Well, and I think they can change too, but
Yeah.
if there's this assumption of a certain level of involvement or a certain level of non-involvement
Right.
without their participation in that,
Right.
then that definitely can cause some problems.
Sure, sure. So the next thing we did, and this had been happening for years, but we
Yeah.
certainly got a little more intense with it. And I think I may have gotten this from you. The idea of breadcrumbing, where we
Mhm.
where we dropped, yes, okay, where we dropped some ideas about this. So the way
Mhm.
that we did breadcrumbing with our 10, 11-year-old was, this was also the time where we came clean about Santa. So we had this
Wait, you,
discussion
you
about
you lasted to 11 with Santa
10.
or 10?
She had just turned 11 that Christmas, and it's easier with an only child.
Okay,
It's,
yeah.
you know,
The cat's out
it's
of the bag with my kids already.
yeah, I think it's easier sometimes with girls. And anyway, so we had already had the Santa discussion, and
Okay.
we had already had to say, listen, we've been lying to you about something your whole life, and here's why. And she
Right.
was, and I said, and I told her, I said, the last couple of years especially, it's really killed me to lie to you, because trust and transparency are such family values. And she looked at me, she was like, I'm so glad you lied to me. And I said, why?
Oh, that's so great.
She said, because you made my childhood more magical. I was like, oh my God.
Wow.
So she
Oh.
understood. And she said, I'm glad you lied to me because you made my childhood more magical. And she was like, and also, I wouldn't have understood. I wouldn't have understood if you told me sooner.
Right.
She said that about this, again, jumping ahead a little bit. She said, I understand why you lied to me about this. I wouldn't have gotten this when I was 6 or 7. And so I'm glad you did. So Santa was one of our breadcrumbing. Because of my work, I was able to talk. I always talk about relationships, and I started, talking about clients that are poly. I mean, obviously not specifically, but I would just mention poly people along with, LGBTQ people or anything, just making that poly as a term that she already knew about.
Yeah.
And then I also started talking about the oddity of romantic love being so different and having such different rules than any other relationships. And so the main one that I talked about was about her pair of grandparents. And I was talking about how, wouldn't it be weird if you were only allowed to love one of your grandparents? You could be friends with all of them, but you couldn't love one. You had to pick one of your grandparents to really love and to love more than the others. And you have to have this superlative love for them. And she's like, that would be so weird. And we, of course, talked about, the breadcrumbing was about siblings. If I had another child, do you think I would love you less? Do you think my heart would double in size? And so those are the breadcrumbing specifics that we use. So thank you for the idea. And that's how we used it.
Yep. I think that's a good, it's probably still ongoing, right? Like,
oh, yeah.
And as your kid gets older, it can be, because all of those are kind of questions, right? Like, what do you think about that? Like some people think that you should live this way. What do you think about that? Rather than just like not talking about it, because when you don't talk about it, then it's assumed that we all agree.
Right. Absolutely. So the next thing the next piece of it is deciding who would tell her. And we decided to tell her together. My husband and I told her together. We did not involve my other partner. And again, everybody does this for different reasons, but we were very intentional about our reason. And our reason is the next step is how we led it. And we led with this being a choice that my husband and I make. That, we asked her, do you know what an open marriage is? And she said, yeah. And I said, oh, really? What is it? And she said, it's where you are open and you talk about everything. And I was like, that is true. And so we introduced the concept, and we talked to her about, that this is a choice that we've made because we believe it helps us be the best versions of ourselves.
Yeah.
And we compared it to other things that we do in our lives that she's already very aware of. We are very, very committed to our exercise. We're committed to our nutrition. We both meditate. We are very committed to getting good rest. We're committed to our community. We take good care of our house and our cars. And so she already sees the work that we put toward kind of having the best version of our house, best version of our car, best version of our physical body, the best version of our spiritual body. We said, this helps us have the best version of our relational body, if you will.
Right.
And so telling her together and helping her understand that this is something we choose together to make our unit stronger, that felt really important to the way we have already set up our lives and what she already understands.
Yeah, I love that.
Thanks. So then we helped her. We also made sure she knew that we had been very intentional about making this choice, that we sought education and counseling when we've needed to for ourselves. So that felt important to us because we wanted her to know that, I guess, just that this wasn't some willy-nilly crazy decision, that we were grounded in it, and that we
really
had
thought about it.
Yeah. And that we had our own supports for it. We had our own counselors, we had our own educators that we have gone to and continue to.
Well, wait, I'm curious about something there, Catherine, because, I'm wondering, did she have any questions for you about why? Did she ask you why it's the best version, or did she have any challenges for you around why aren't you monogamous? Or, did she have any questions like that for you?
No, she didn't. And I'll tell you what she really only had 2 questions, which I think will make more sense if I tell them in the order. But she didn't really question, of course it may be because, she also has a counselor and an educator as a mother. I may have given her enough information that she didn't have to question it. But I think what I said was, that we just like she's always seen us with lots of friends and a big community, that we have a strong capacity for love and romantic connection, and we enjoy that. And, that we've been together since we were 22, and that it's been fun to add the energy of other people, and to be able to do other hobbies with other people, and to also learn more about ourselves and mirroring from other relationships. Probably, I mean, I told her all that. So I guess I maybe just gave her the answer for why we were monogamous.
Well, and I guess I wonder, I mean, maybe this is jumping ahead again, but do you make space for her to like not be okay with that? Like for her to be like, I don't think I would want non-monogamy, or that wouldn't be the best version of myself.
Absolutely. It's funny. One of my cousins asked me, where I'm out to them. And recently she said, because our daughter is identifying as, she goes between bi and pansexual is how she describes herself. And so my cousin came to me and she said, I just need to ask you a really straight, hard question. And I said, lay it on me. We've always had that kind of relationship. And she said, are you making it okay for Grace to just be some, like, air quotes, normal, white, heterosexual Christian girl? And I was like, sure. She's like, is that okay? And I was like, of course it's okay. And I said, her whole life, we've always used the word tolerance. We do live in the South. And when she was little, she came home from the gym, the daycare at the gym at holiday time. And she said, Mama, I'm so scared because I love Santa Claus, but the girl at the gym, the other little girl, she told me I was going to go to a place with lots of fire because I love Santa Claus. And she loves this other man. I don't remember his name. And it was Jesus, right? So she had a little kid prophetizing to her at the, so we started talking about tolerance from that conversation, that you can believe whatever you want to believe as long as you don't scare someone else with your beliefs or shame someone else for their beliefs. So we've been having that conversation our whole, I mean, it's for as long as she could remember. And most of our friends are not poly. Most of our friends are not ethically non-monogamous. They are, they are monogamous people. We have friends from different religions. We have friends from, their different sexual orientations. So until we said, this is not the path for everyone. And some people do this for a while and then they don't, and then they do again. Or some people never do it. They think about it and they do the research and they decide not to. So I do hope, it's certainly been part of our intention, that she believes that she could do it however she wants. I mean, she's 13 and she hasn't dated anyone yet. So TBD, we could talk in 10 years.
Well, and I mean, but it does, I mean, that's the thing that I think is important to say, because I think I'm mostly saying this because I could see somebody, probably not people that are really listening to my podcast all that much, but like somebody could be in there and be like, you're indoctrinating your child into non-monogamy, and look, she's identifying as pansexual. So obviously the sex positive queer agenda is being, blanketed on your child. And I'm like, but no, I mean, you got to understand that the dominant culture is pushing, like you said, especially growing up in the South. I mean, I grew up in the South, and I felt very pushed to be a particular way, which is not the way that I am. And so it took a lot of work for me to be able to feel like I could be who I was. And I mean, so I think you making it safe and okay for her to be whoever she wants, and then being an example of a way of being different, is probably not indoctrinating, but just supportive. But I just kind of, and it sounds like you think a lot about that it's really important that if she decides she wants to be monogamous and Christian and heterosexual, that you're still going to love her, and that's perfectly okay.
I think it's great, whatever she chooses, if it's making her happy. And we've had those conversations too about, we live in a liberal arts town that has a university, and obviously I have a master's degree and my husband has a bachelor's degree, and we've said, if welding is interesting to you and you want to be a fantastic welder and it's fun for you, like you don't have to do our path. So I do believe that there are many ways that we've tried to let her create her own path. But I do think it's certainly worth discussing that to make sure that she doesn't feel like we would be upset if she were different than us. So thank you for bringing that up. We did emphasize a lot about safety and security, which to me, I believe, at least subconsciously, is the most important concern that the kids are going to have. Absolutely. We have so much of this lofty prefrontal cortex understanding, abstraction about relationship, blah, blah, blah. They really want to know, like, is it going to change? Am I fed? Am I safe? Am I warmed? Are the people that love me, are they going to love me? I think that they need to know that most, and we can get lost in the weeds. So we really try to continue to bring it down to concrete emphasis about her safety and security.
Yeah. And things that definitely won't happen, right? Like things that definitely won't happen. Like, we will still love you.
Yes.
Your family is still your family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely. And we did talk about, and I think it probably also helped that we had already been in this long enough. We said, really nothing's going to change other than, who my boyfriend is now, what he is to me. And she had some funny, like, oh, this makes so much more sense now. And it was very funny to watch her like connect the dots. And it was really cute to see that happen. And then the hardest part of the conversation was explaining the need for her to be secret, for this to be a secret, and with whom it needed to be a secret. And then, of course, this is going to be different for every family where we live.
Because you're not out, right? You're not out at all.
I would say I'm quasi out. So my family knows, all of our good friends know, but we are not. I mean, people at her school don't know. People only know because we have told them very intentionally, and we've been lucky enough to not have a big exposure scare. I think that there are people in our community that wonder or have some questions, but it hasn't been we haven't had some big shaming outing or anything like that.
But there's a worry about that. It sounds like, based on where you live.
Based on where we live, and again, to my boyfriend's point, really, really not wanting our choices of how we live to have any potential to hurt her, as much as we can protect her from that, which as she gets older, I'm realizing is a little bit of maybe me being a control freak, trying to control things that are out of my control.
Well, I'm wondering if you're open for a little pushback on that.
Sure.
Well, because what if you were gay? What if your partner was of the same gender as you? I mean, that's not something you can hide.
Right.
Or if you did hide it, it would be pretty painful to hide that.
Yeah.
And that could also expose you to bullying, right?
Yep.
And that could also expose your child to bullying at school if the people at your school, if the people at her school are, homophobic or, just really have been indoctrinated in the idea of, heterosexual marriage is the only true marriage or whatever. Or what if you were trans or your partner was trans or, and you wouldn't ask her to hide those things.
Right.
Or at least I hope you wouldn't. But those could also put her at risk. And that's a choice or not necessarily it's not a choice though, right? But it's like, it's a part of who you are that, would potentially, some people wouldn't like it. And I guess I wonder, like, not that I think people should always be at choice about what's comfortable for them and what feels safe for them. But I guess I wonder how this feels different in terms
Absolutely. It's a great pushback, and I appreciate it. And it's sort of why I said the longer it goes on, the more I realize that maybe I'm trying to control something that is really out of my control in the first place. Because just in the last 2 months, is when I came out to my dad, and it's the first coming out experience that I've had that was negative, and it was really negative. Ironically, and I didn't do this on purpose, I told him, and then 4 days later he called me. When I told him, it went really well, and then 4 days later he called me and threatened suicide and said that he didn't know how he could be in the same room with us again. And he lives in our town too. He's very, very involved in our lives. And the day that he called me to do that was International Coming Out Day.
Oh my gosh.
How about some irony? So the reason I share that is I was on social media and seeing all this about coming out, and it really hit me between the eyes, the privilege I've had to be able to hide this, right? I can hide. I have been able for 8 years to hide behind what looks like seemingly heterosexual normative marriage. And I've been able to pretty much fully express what feels right to me sexually and relationally without having to face how difficult it is to get that negative judgment when you come out. And so that has been a lot of discussion in our family in the last 2 months about Why are we hiding? What does it mean? What are these negative impacts? I mean, my daughter was 12 when this happened with her grandfather. And oh, this was the most heartbreaking part. She said, wow, I really thought that his love for us wasn't so changeable. And I was like, you mean conditional? And she goes, yeah, conditional.
Oh, yeah.
Ouch. Right?
Yeah. Oh, well, and I'm sure that was heartbreaking for her.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing you can do to protect her from that. And that must have been awful as a mama.
Oh, so many. Well, it was awful as a daughter and awful as a mama, right?
Well, yeah. Well, as a daughter, sure. Like also heartbreaking. But like, I'm just thinking about, I decided to tell my child's grandfather about me. And then that caused my child's grandfather to act in ways that are hurting my child. You know, I mean,
exactly.
It can be easy to kind of justify it if it's yourself, you know, but when it's someone else that you're doing that for, it can, I mean, because what I'm hearing and what you're saying is like, what you're trying to do is protect her, right? But like what you're seeing is like, you can't, but then you also have to be with the experience of a choice that you're making or a lifestyle that you're living. I mean, how much of this is a choice? We don't, you know,
yeah.
but like the lifestyle that you're living and the ways that you're moving through the world, potentially having a negative impact on your kid. That's tough. Like that's hard. I think about that too. Cause my kids, I mean, I also live in the South. I live in a very large metropolitan area though. So I feel a little bit like fortunate that I feel like most people that I interact with understand non-monogamy, polyamory. But it's been a very gradual thing since we moved here of like checking, who can I tell, who is safe to kind of do this with? And I'm sort of bracing myself for the moment when parents of children that my kids go to school with know that we're polyamorous and they pull away from us.
Yes.
And they don't want maybe they don't want their kid over at my house, or they don't want my kid playing with their kid, or you know, they don't invite us to some birthday party or something like that. And my kid has to experience social consequences because of our lifestyle. Like it's really hard and scary. And it really hasn't happened yet that I'm aware of, but I mean, it can't not if we're going to be out. And
exactly.
And at the same time, I think, well, I had a friend in middle school whose mom was a lesbian, and you know, it was, reflecting on it now, it's pretty obvious. Like her mom was not hiding it. Her mom was like super butch, you know, and, you know, I mean, it was real obvious, but I think that, you know, we were all kind of closeted, you know, white suburban Christian middle schoolers. And so, you know, if you didn't know what to look for, you wouldn't know. Right. And, so I think a lot of people didn't know, but then at some point, someone said something. But I remember I knew because like I was friends with her and we went over to her house and she talked about it and you know, and all of that. But then someone told like the whole class and she got really upset. And she actually thought that I had done it, that I had like outed her mom. And I didn't. But also like, you know, there was no, like her mom clearly wasn't trying to hide it. Her mom was trying to be who she was. And it was just sort of, but her daughter was embarrassed and her daughter was afraid that people wouldn't like her and all this stuff. And I was just like, but you know, what really needs to exist, going back to what you said before, is tolerance and acceptance of different types of people. And that's what we need. I mean, I think that's what we need to stick up to protect our child from, is not from experiencing that kind of bigotry and prejudice and hurtfulness, but instead to understand, like, when that happens to someone else, that's hurtful to everybody. So if it happens to me, I'm in solidarity with those other people. That's kind of how I frame it, at least. And, you know, so I don't know, so I don't know, that's my perspective on that.
Yeah, it's complicated. And exactly, I mean, the idea of her having social consequences because of what we're doing, I think is the reason that we have decided to be more closeted than, and the other thing that was interesting is explaining, well, I actually thought this was a fantastic opportunity to explain the difference between having to realize that so often we have a secret because there's shame around it. And for her to understand, like, we keep this a secret, but not because we're ashamed, but because of where we are choosing to live and how it can be more intolerant than other places in the world. And she loves where we live. And so, and she understands, again, we reminded her of the Santa Claus burning in hell thing. And so she's very aware of, there is certainly a pocket where we live that is very liberal and understanding and tolerant, and right around the edges of it, there are way more people that are not. And so, I mean, Libby, I don't have a clear answer on it. I feel like we are straddling that line.
It's hard. It
is.
It's
and it changes and it's flowing. And again,
Well,
having this experience with my father is changing the landscape about it a little bit, because we are feeling the sting of that. And so it's like, oh, do we tighten up even more, or do we, we're already, okay, we're okay. Do we open it up a little bit more? It's a challenge. So yes, to your point, if it were harder to hide this, would we? That point is
like if your partner was living with you, like my partner's living with my husband and I. And so it's like, we would have to deliberately be really exclusionary and hurtful to them if we were to hide it, you know? And even now, like I said, it's been this gradual, like, you know, hey, by the way, this is my partner here, you know, hey, you know, and by the way, they live with us. And by the way, we're polyamorous, you know, it's been a gradual, you know, because I mean, there's also this balance of like, what is actually people's business to know about you? You know, like, is it anybody's business what your sex life is? And, you know, do I go asking the other parents of my kids' friends, like, who are you having sex with this week? Like, is that even, I mean, so that's the other piece of it, right? I want to say there's two sides to it, right? There's the side of like, you know, privilege and kind of protecting yourself and protecting your social privilege. Whereas like if your kid's pansexual, you know, or trans or non-binary or autistic or whatever, you know, they're going to experience all kinds of marginalization because of who they are, or, you know, or different race, or, you know, all these different things, you know. But then there's the flip side of what is actually people's business to judge you around. Like if you were practicing paganism, is that their business? That's your personal faith. You know, they might, you know, in the South might have a problem with that, might think you were going to hell, you know, might need to feel the need to proselytize to you, and that's not their business, you know, so that it is a tricky thing. So I guess I don't want to come out as saying like, and this is where I flip-flop on it a lot, where I'm like, what do you really need to know about my life?
Right. To your point, even if we were pagan, there definitely would be families that would not want their kids to come to our house for a sleepover or for a birthday party. And I think right now that is still something we're trying to protect, is her, again, being in middle school. It's hard enough. We're trying to do as much as we can to not add extra burdens to those social constructs and constellations and understanding. And so explaining that to her, we also, in that part of the explanation, we talked about changing norms, generations, how society sees this. So we explained why, you know, when we told her, the only one of our parents that knew was my mom. And so we explained, and she was like, oh gosh, yeah, granddaddy, you know, I won't say his name, he would really struggle with that. Well, now 2 years later, we've told him she was right, you know, or she, you know, she'd say, oh, Grammy, I think Grammy would understand, but it would be pretty hard for her. And she lives far away, so she doesn't really need to know. You know, we're discussing this. We talked about for her what our parents thought of interracial dating or homosexuality or bisexuality, and how difficult that was for us growing up. And we've talked through that. And she just thinks that, she's like, that is ridiculous, really? And so helping her see how things have changed and those norms, that was an interesting and important part of the conversation too.
And I think that's a good point, you know, that we're seated in a context. And you know, on the one hand, you know, what came up for me when you were saying about the paganism, I was kind of like, yeah, but like, do you want to be friends with those people? You know, do you want your kid, do you want to like go out of your way?
We don't, but what if it's somebody that she wants to be friends with? And again, I think eventually she would question that.
Well, or
But
she'd push back with you, right? Maybe she would say, "Hey, mom, like, can you can it with the pagan stuff? Because I really want to be friends with this person, you know."
Mhm.
And that, I guess that could be a place where like she's asking for the secret rather than you telling her, "Hey, you need to keep this a secret to protect yourself," kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. It's
But
complicated.
it's complicated. But then the other thing that I'm thinking is what you're saying of like changing norms over time and understanding that like there's a time when things were just really not acceptable, and not only not acceptable, it wasn't safe. Like it wasn't
Right.
safe to be like, it's still not safe in a lot of places to be transgender and to be clockable as transgender. Like you will be targeted for violence or bullying or what have you.
Or
And
to
at the
have
same,
brown skin, or to
yeah,
have, or to be
well,
gay still.
definitely not to be, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And at the same time, what it makes me think about is like, inserting into that conversation that we need to protect each other,
Mhm.
and I don't know, that's something that comes up a lot for me is like, okay, if I have the privilege to hide who I am even though I am part of a minority in some kind of
Mhm.
way, and I'm not leading the pride parade, I'm not leading the marginalized cavalcade or whatever, but
Mhm.
like I think if that's where we are situated, then I feel this call to be, and maybe, I don't know, to be part of supporting everybody
Mhm.
being
Mhm.
accepted for who they are. And I guess I wonder if that comes into the conversation of how do we choose who to engage with
Mhm.
based on their ability to be inclusive of all different kinds of people.
Right. And again, I mean, I'm saying this about where we live, but in our friend bubble, in our community bubble, it
Yeah.
is pretty safe. I mean, some people we don't tell just because we aren't close enough that we would never talk about sex with them, or we would
Yeah,
never,
it's
so
like,
it would
well,
be
you don't
like,
want to talk about your sex life.
it would be weird with some of the people that we might have a potluck with at school or whatever. But it's
Yeah.
so our reasons for telling people before we told our daughter, we were always very clear. Why would we tell this person? Why would we tell this couple? And so, I don't think that there's a whole lot of risk to her in her small school, in our small community. It's more in that wider gossipy small town that we live in kind of
Right.
thing. And I don't, it's interesting, chicken or the egg. I'm thinking here, Libby, since she has known, keep in mind, we told her when she was 11 and a half, and she's now, she's 13. She is very, um, even before she told us that she was, potentially identifying as bi or pansexual, she
Mhm.
was wearing pride shirts, and
Mm.
she had been exposed to books about transgender kids and how difficult their journey is, and she very much has some of that, I mean, just wanting to be tolerant and also advocate for um, marginalized populations. So I don't know if that's just because we've always preached
Yeah.
tolerance and we are that way, if it's because she's also thinking about, wow, I hope nobody would do that to my family. Who knows what the inner workings are, but
Yeah.
so far well, and let me also, this is going to lead into something else about her friends. Are you okay to start shifting toward that?
Yeah. 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 Mhm.
So the next step in my list of what we did is we did offer her a counselor to talk to, and also
Mhm.
that we would be happy to look in to see if there were any poly kid groups online if she felt like she needed a community, because we were asking her at that point to not talk to her friends about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
She hasn't taken us up on that, but she was interested. And then we said, if you do want to tell a friend, we understand why you would want to. We just ask that we have a family talk about it first, so that we can be, again, intentional about
Yeah.
when and why and who and what are the implications. Since then, she told we actually, she asked me to do it with her. We told her best friend who had moved away. So that was pretty easy because they live across the country. This friend's mom is a social worker that specializes in trans and LGBTQ populations. So we knew it was a pretty safe landing, right? And it went really well. And we talked through that. And then one of her best friends here, who is the son of one of our best friends, he started to get wise. He's like, why is this my husband's girlfriend? Why is she over at their house a lot? And why is my boyfriend over at their house a lot and they're always hanging out with us? And like, what's up with that? He asked his mom. So then his mom.
Okay.
So as families, we sat down and we talked about it. And so
that's great.
So it's been nice for her to have a couple of friends. And the other thing that's interesting is so many times over the last, year and a half, 2 years coming up since we told her, I told her, I said, we're going to have to sit down and have mama counselor talks because we always laugh about what it's like to have a counselor as a mom,
Yeah.
And I was like, I was
I'm
like,
glad I'm not the only one.
My husband calls it counselorese, and my daughter and I, she'll say mama counselor talks, and I'll just check in. How does it feel? How's your connection with me feeling? How's your connection with daddy feeling? How's your connection with my boyfriend feeling? How's your connection with daddy's girlfriend feeling? Is there anything that you want more of, less of, family time? How does it feel when our friends are over? I do these check-ins with her.
Mm-hmm.
And then she's always like, Mama, I understand why it's such a big deal to you. It's just not that big a deal to us.
Like, can I just go back? Can I just go back to what I'm doing, please?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So within we told her we were open to her fears, and also it gave us a chance to talk about consent. We talked about sexual safety, all of that sort of thing in the conversation. So you did ask about what she asked. The 2 questions she asked, when we were first explaining it, she said, I saw her getting emotional. And I said, are you having some big feels? And she's like, yeah. And I said, do you want to get in my lap? She was still 11. She said, yeah. She got in my lap and she was crying. And I said, can you tell me what the big feels are? And she said, I just don't understand why, if something makes you so happy, why anybody would be upset about that or be mean to you about that.
Oof. Yeah.
Right. I was like, oh, precious heart. She also said when we told her, I'm so happy for you guys, which was really sweet to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next morning she crawled in bed with me and she said, I thought of a question. And I said, yes, what is it? And she said, do you have sex with these other people? Because we hadn't specifically said that, we were just keeping it open. And I said, sometimes, not always. It depends on what our connection is with them. And I said, but the one thing that always happens is safe sex. And she knew about that. And we talked about it. And I said, and always there's consent, and always daddy and I talk about it. And that was really, other than me checking in with her, she's just really rolled with it. And the only times during those check-ins that anything, I don't even want to say negative has come up, her only feedback has been, there have been times where she says, I think I'd like to have a few more family nights because, of course, our time is split, and we're like, okay, what do you want to do in those family nights? And we just roll with that. Or she'll say, I really have fun when your boyfriend and I go snowboarding, but it's summer. Like, I want to have something that we do together in the summer. Okay, we make that happen. She has said it's been a little weird for her to see me especially be more emotionally affected, with a new relationship, some of the volatility. Mm-hmm. My husband and I have a pretty steady Eddie easy. We don't have a lot of big fights. I mean, we have them, but she certainly has seen a lot more of that with my boyfriend and I than my husband and I. Mm-hmm. And she said, it was kind of weird to see that this grown up that I've always seen as so strong and has it together, could be so affected and get so emotional. Yeah. And she's like, at first that was kind of scary for me, but then I realized it's just normal. It's just emotions. Hello, counselor kid. But she did tell me that it scared her a little bit. And I said, would you rather me work on not showing you that? And she's like, no, I don't want you to pretend. She's like, I just wanted to tell you, it was just weird to see you be so emotional.
Yeah.
So those were some interesting conversations.
I bet. Well, and I mean, I guess, Catherine, I want to highlight some of the things that I'm hearing that I can see that you're doing really well just from the third party standpoint, because I think I want to highlight that for our listeners. Which is, I think that what you said before of I'm going to tell you this, I'm going to tell you why, I'm going to give you all the context. I love the ways in which you're open to hearing from her and how she feels about it. And you're not pushing it on her if she's look, you're checking in, you're giving her room to give you feedback. But if she doesn't want to give it to you, she doesn't have any to give you or whatever, you kind of leave her room to go keep playing her video games or whatever it is she's
Right.
doing, and I think that the other thing that I think is so important that you're doing is you're not trying to get her to see it any particular way. You're not trying to hide anything to create a very particular type of picture for her. And at the same time, you're not giving her more than what she needs to handle. Like, you're not going to give her the guts and the inside. And so I guess I want to like draw the distinction between being boundaried, which is what I see. Like, I'm not going to tell you the ins and outs of these relationships. I'm not going to let you necessarily be on the roller coaster ride with me of everything that I'm feeling and doing, which I would call like parentifying your kid, right? Like overly being too emotionally involved with what you're going through with them. And that's because you got clear on your own story about it before talking to her about it. You did all that blind spot work with your partner. And then, like, on the flip side, you're not trying to hide the fact that you're human and you might have complicated feelings about it, and you might have emotions, and other people might have complicated feelings about it. So it's like it's a both and of like giving her as much of the information as she, like you said, as she needs to form her own experience around it, while also not dumping more on her than is appropriate. And I think that's what is so important with any of these kinds of things, with anything you're trying to talk to a kid about. It's like, what do they really want and what do they really need? And sometimes you have to, as a parent, decide that for them. And sometimes you have to work with them to get that with them and create that with them. And I think that just, it sounds like you're really working hard to be in that middle ground.
Well, I so appreciate you reflecting that, because, as with any being on a parenting journey, being on an ethical non-monogamy journey, there are days where I'm like, oh my God, I'm fucking everything up. Oh my God, everything's going to hell. So hearing that feedback today was really nice. And I will say that one of the places in that, because I certainly was over parentalized, and so I'm very sensitive to that. And because she has seen me more emotional, and she is a very soft-hearted, kind, loving human, she will often come and want to, hug me or give me, and I did sit down and talk to her about that. I said, I love it that you see me hurting and you want to give me a hug. And I love that that's just the human that you are. And I need you to make sure that before you offer me that hug, you check in and make sure that you're not doing it because you feel like you need to take care of me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's not your job. I'm a grown-ass woman who is strong and has all the feels. And I'm going to be strong as fuck about some things. And I am going to be strong in my pain too.
Yeah.
And I'm going to feel it all. And of course, I love to get I hope things get better, mama, or a hug as you walk out the door or something, but not because you feel like you need to take care of me or you're worried that I'm not okay. And I said, and it's really important. I also think she happens to be very empathic. And so we've talked about this kind of thing where I said, I don't want you to take on my feelings. We talk about it, her empath shield. I said, you got to put your empath shield up. And if you need space or you need hey, mama, I'm trying to study and you're upset. Can you go take a drive? You can ask me to do that. If the shield isn't strong enough, you can do that.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you saying that. And it is something that is another thing I've been very intentional about, because I also do want to have the freedom to be emotionally expressive without worrying about her taking it on too much.
Well, right. It's important that she sees that you are a human. If you hide it all from her, then she's going to assume that her emotions aren't okay either. Right. Like, that's going to, I'm weak. No, I'm not strong like mom, so being able to show your emotions is important. Being able to show that you can handle them. I think that's the other part, like, that you don't need her to fix them, that you're not an unsafe person for her if you're being emotional. And that's the hard work of being a grown up that, we're not always able to do. Sometimes we might be in our feelings and we might actually be, like you said, not able to be the most present and connected parent when we're having our emotions. And I think that's where we have to acknowledge that to ourselves. And if our kid's able to be with that, acknowledge it to the kid. Hey, mom actually needs a break.
Yeah, that's okay.
Dad needs a break right now. I go talk to the other. That's why ideally we have more adults to help out, whether it's another parent, another caregiver, a friend, whatever, so that, if we're having a bad day, we can have our bad day and we can tell our kid, I'm having a bad day and I'll do my best with you, but I'm having a bad day. And that doesn't mean you have to fix me, but it might not be, I might not be easy to be around right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And we all have that in our house, and we all have ways of communicating that to the kids so that they know that. And honestly, I think it's important for kids too, to understand, even though they don't have to caretake us, that we are all humans coexisting together.
Mhm.
And that means if mom's having a bad day, you might need to be gentle with her. Like, you might not be able to be your absolute worst shit show self as a child. You might actually need to you don't have to take care of me, but mom might need you to take care of you a little bit more.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Absolutely. And being able to, I mean, even before all this, we had part of our family vernacular was, to come in and be like, I am and depending on her age, now we're like, I'm in a bitchy mood. Earlier it was not quite that rough, but like, I'm in a bitchy mood, and it has nothing to do with you two people that I love. And I need you to not take on any of my shit. And I'm going to work. I'm going to go journal, and I'm going to go meditate before dinner. And I'm going to see if I can shift my energy. And if I can't, then I may eat by myself, or I may sit with you guys, and I might just be quiet and be kind of bitchy, but it has nothing to do with you, and you haven't done anything wrong. And so when we can own
picking
that,
up on my shitty energy, you are correct. I actually am in a shitty mood.
Exactly.
What you are seeing is real, and it's happening.
Yes. Yes. Well, and I think this leads well into the last point that I wanted to make. I know we're getting up on time here.
We are.
Back to outcomes and expectations about the influence that this has on our kid. And I needed to, as my daughter turned 13, I sat down with my mom a little bit because I wanted to kind of prep her. Like, I'm not interested in hearing you say any of the following, but also I needed to say it to myself, because I know I can, of course, be my own harshest judge in all accounts, and especially in this big, amazing job of being a mother.
Yeah, no kidding.
But my kid is stepping into developmentally normal differentiation and rebellion, and she needs to become her own person. And as she stumbles along that path, she's going to fuck things up, and she's going to get in trouble, and she's going to be snarky, and she's going to be in bad moods, and she's going to make bad choices. And that is a normal part of being a human, whether your parents are married or divorced, whether your parents are gay or straight, whether your parents are white or not, whether you're Christian or not. None of that is going to keep a kid from naturally, normally differentiating and having struggles along those paths. And so this whole idea of like ruining your kids or looking at the smoking gun is the fact that we're poly, that for anything that my kid struggles with, like, that's what I want to make sure I don't do. And I want to make sure that my parents don't do. Like, this is not going to be the smoking gun.
Oh, can I get an amen? Because dang. You said that so perfectly. I just want to take that, what you just said, and I'm going to put it on a little separate recording and play it for myself anytime I'm going, am I ruining my children? And by being so weird, but also for anybody else who would worry about that, because I think that is a worry, right? If I am polyamorous and my kid has to grapple with that, does that mean that they're going to go be drug addicted, or they're going to go be, sexually promiscuous or rebellious or whatever? And to your point, whatever journey our kid goes on, yeah, we have some part to play in that for sure. But also kids go on their own journey, and they go through their own stuff, and they go through rebellious periods. They go through sad periods, angry periods, difficult periods where they're, like you said, they're going through that differentiation, all of that. And that it's actually humbling sometimes how little that actually has to do with me.
So true. So true. So true.
Oh, I think I'm going to end it there, because I think that that's a perfect place to end it. And, and for anybody who is on this journey and who wants to connect around this, I hope you'll reach out to us. I hope you'll reach out to me. I hope you'll reach out to Catherine. And because I do think parents need each other. I do think parents need each other.
That old saying of it takes a village to raise a child. I'm always like, that's bullshit. It takes a village to keep the parents sane enough to raise a child.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah. Well, so Catherine, how can people find you if they want to connect with you, learn more about you and stuff that you're offering?
Sure. The easiest way, of course, is a website. And I actually have two different websites. They are connected, but you have to be in the know to get to one of them. So, because, as I said, because we're still not fully out and my other coaches are not fully out either, we have our kind of boilerplate website, and that's expansiveconnection.com. And you can see us and learn about our work. And then we also have a site that you can only get to if you type it in. It's not searchable, which is expansiveconnection.com/ENM, standing for ethical non-monogamy. And that's where you'll find the more open side. You can find the different educational offerings. We have self-study courses. We have live study courses. We have coaching, of course, our coaching services. And so that's where you can find all of our different offerings. We are on Instagram, expansive.coaching. And so you can find us there. We do post probably 6 times a week, sometimes personal stories. Sometimes we're just passing along little memes that meant something to us that day. Sometimes we're talking about our different offerings or that sort of thing. So the websites, you can also find our Instagram, and we also are on Twitter. You can find all that on our website. So that's probably the best place to go.
Well, and you've got a group program coming up, right?
Yes. My other 2 coaches both came from very religious backgrounds, Christian religious backgrounds. One of my coaches, both of her parents are pastors. So they have done a lot of work on untangling their religion from shame, their sexuality from shame, and are still both practicing Christians. And I think, in some ways, I'm just in awe of that there's so many people that if they struggle with anything, they just go completely the other side and they just completely abandon an idea. And I think it's a testament to these 2 amazing women and the work that they've done to really untangle their shame around religion and shame around sexuality, and still have found a relationship with their God, and it gives them a lot. And so they have put together a group experience where other people who might be anywhere in that process can come together for that community and talk about it, and their resources and their challenging questions, and mostly community. They will be doing coaching. They'll coach a couple each week, and the rest of the community will watch and give feedback. And loving feedback, like witnessing kind of feedback. And lots of resource shares and things like that. So that launches in January.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing all that.
Yeah.
And thanks for being here. This has been such a wonderful conversation.
Same. Thank you so much. And thank you for all the work that you do, and keep it coming, because you you keep me riding my bike faster. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, and now you get to hear yourself on your bike ride.
Oh gosh, no way. No, that'll be a skipper. I'll just let your listeners enjoy that one.
Well, I'm sure that they'll love hearing from you. Thanks, Catherine.
Thanks, Libby.
Thank you so much for joining me today. If you have any thoughts about what I've said or a question for the show, I would love to hear from you. You can reach me via my website, libbysinback.com, or you can connect to me on any of my social channels. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. I'll also say that if you're loving my podcasts, but feel like your relationship could maybe use some more help, this is work I do with my coaching clients and in the Relational Non-Monogamy Circle. If you're interested, you can either set up a free introductory session with me to see if coaching might be a fit for you, or check out the Relational Non-Monogamy Circle online at libbysinback.com/RNMC. If you love this podcast, please share it. Share it with your friends, your networks, your Facebook groups, etc. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you listen on iTunes or Stitcher, it would be super awesome if you left a review or a comment, because that will help more people find the show. Making Polyamory Work is created by me, Libby Sinback. It is edited by Finn of the Normalizing Non-Monogamy podcast and hosted on the Anchor.fm platform. Van de Leon manages the website and posts the transcripts. Thanks for being with me today, and I'll see you soon.